The train station was alive with the usual chaos, announcements blaring, people hustling with suitcases, and the rhythmic clatter of wheels against the tracks. But for little Emily, 8 years old and far too aware of the world's harshness, the noise was just background. She clutched her worn backpack with one hand and the last $5 she had in the other. The coins and bills were all that remained from her mother's hard-earned wages, money meant to buy dinner or a warm meal to fill her tiny stomach. But as she scanned the crowd, her eyes caught a man slumped on a cold wooden bench, shivering under a threadbare coat that had clearly seen better days. He looked hungry, tired, defeated. His hair was unkempt, and his eyes, though gentle, carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken struggles. Emily's heart clenched. She had learned early that life was not always fair, that sometimes even the kindest gestures went unnoticed, but she couldn't just walk past. Her mother always told her, "Kindness costs nothing, Emily, but it changes everything." Her stomach growled again, reminding her of the reality of her own hunger, but the thought of ignoring the man made her chest ache. She took a deep breath, stepped forward, and placed the crumpled $5 bill into his trembling hand. "Here, maybe this will help," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the station. The man looked up, startled at first. Then a faint smile crept across his face, a smile that was warm and genuine, one that seemed almost magical in its sincerity. He nodded and muttered a quiet, "Thank you," before tucking the money safely into his coat pocket. Emily turned away, expecting nothing more. But as she walked toward the vending machines to grab a small snack with her remaining coins, she felt a strange sense of lightness, as if the act of giving had lifted a weight off her small shoulders. The world, for a brief moment, seemed kinder. Little did she know, the man she had helped was not just another face in the crowd. He was Robert Whitman, a millionaire entrepreneur who had quietly slipped away from his lavish life to see the world from a different perspective, to remind himself of the struggles that money often shielded him from. Robert had spent the last decade building a fortune, but he had grown weary of the shallow exchanges and polite facades that came with his wealth. This train station, in all its raw humanity, offered him a glimpse of something he hadn't felt in years: authentic connection. Watching Emily's small hand stretch out with genuine concern, Robert felt a flicker of hope he hadn't realized he'd lost. Here was a child who didn't know his name, his wealth, or his power, yet she had given selflessly, without hesitation. In that moment, he realized that the real treasures in life weren't measured in dollars or property, but in acts of unprompted kindness. Emily wandered through the station, her eyes scanning the digital boards above the platforms. She had missed the morning rush, had skipped breakfast, and yet, despite her own hardships, her heart had compelled her to act. She didn't think about how she would explain this to her mother, who was already struggling to keep their small apartment warm, or how she would go hungry that night. Her mind was simple and clear. If someone needed help, you gave it, no questions asked. As the minutes passed, Robert stayed on the bench, silently observing. Something about Emily's courage, her innocence, and her willingness to put others before herself stirred a memory deep within him. He remembered his own childhood, before wealth had insulated him from the harsher truths of life, before his parents had left him in the care of nannies and tutors. He remembered moments when a stranger's kindness had changed his outlook, when small gestures had carried more weight than any inheritance could ever provide. The crowd began to thin as trains came and went, each whistle punctuating the air with urgency. Emily, feeling the weight of her own emptiness, finally approached the vending machine. She fumbled with her coins, finally managing to get a small packet of chips, her stomach growling at the thought of that meager snack. But even as she ate, she couldn't shake the feeling of satisfaction that came from giving. Robert stood slowly, his mind made up. He would not let this small, courageous girl disappear back into her difficult life unnoticed. Her act had reached him in ways no financial transaction could ever hope to achieve. He approached her carefully, not wanting to startle her, but determined to offer a gesture that mirrored hers, an act of kindness in return, though of a scale she couldn't yet imagine. "Hey, young lady, he said gently, his voice carrying an unfamiliar warmth. Emily turned, blinking up at him with wide, curious eyes. Yes? She asked cautiously, unsure if he was talking to her. My name is Robert, he said, smiling. I just want you to know that what you did, it meant a lot. You're a very special person. Emily felt a blush rise to her cheeks, unsure if she should be proud or embarrassed. She nodded shyly. I just wanted to help. Robert knelt down slightly, meeting her at eye level. Well, you did, and you don't even know how much it helped me. You reminded me that there's still good in the world. And that's priceless. Emily's small smile returned, brighter this time. She had no idea that this brief encounter would change the course of both their lives forever. The echo of the train station lingered in Emily's mind long after she left. That fleeting moment, the warmth in the stranger's eyes, haunted her in the best possible way. She didn't understand why, but she felt lighter, like a burden had lifted, even if only for a few minutes. Yet life outside the station hadn't paused. The bitter wind still cut through her thin coat, and the worry of getting home before dark pressed heavily on her small shoulders. Robert Whitman, however, couldn't let the encounter fade so easily. Back in his sprawling office, surrounded by the trappings of wealth, artwork he never looked at, gadgets he never used, and contracts that demanded his attention, he found himself replaying the little girl's act over and over. He kept picturing her tiny hand slipping the crumpled $5 bill into his own. There was a purity in her gesture that money could never buy, and it stirred something dormant in him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, Robert returned to the train station. He didn't know what he expected, another meeting by chance? A miracle? But as he approached the same bench, Emily wasn't there. He asked the station staff if they had seen a little girl around 8 or 9, but the answer was no. Most people would have given up, chalked it up to coincidence. But Robert's curiosity, and something deeper, a protective instinct, wouldn't allow him to. He began asking quietly around the neighborhood near the station, hoping someone had seen her. Meanwhile, Emily was walking home, her stomach still empty, her mind swirling with the memory of the man. She told herself that she hadn't done anything special. After all, anyone would have given what they could to someone in need, right? Yet, the memory of his smile lingered. Something about the way he looked at her made her feel seen, important even, despite the harshness of her everyday life. Emily's mother, Maria, was waiting at their small apartment, wringing her hands as usual. Bills had piled up again, and the week's groceries were gone faster than expected. Where were you, Em? Maria asked, trying to hide her worry. I've been calling you. Dinner's not much tonight, just some bread and soup. Emily shrugged, carefully hiding the $5 sacrifice she'd made. I helped someone, Mom, she said softly. A man, he looked like he really needed it. Maria's eyes widened in surprise, but then she smiled faintly. You're always thinking of others, aren't you? That's my girl. She ruffled Emily's hair. I just hope the world treats you as kindly as you treat it. Back in his luxurious office, Robert couldn't shake the thought of Emily. He asked his assistant to track down the little girl, but with so little information, the search seemed impossible. Finally, he decided that waiting wasn't enough. He needed to see her again, to ensure that the kindness she had shown didn't vanish unnoticed. Over the next few days, Robert quietly investigated the area around the station. He spoke with local shopkeepers, train conductors, and even a few school teachers. One elderly shop owner finally gave him a lead, a small girl who often helped her mother sell flowers at the corner near the station. Her description matched Emily perfectly. That afternoon, Robert found himself standing across the street from a modest apartment building, watching a little girl run up the steps with a bag of groceries. His heart raced as he saw her. There was no mistaking it. This was the child who had given him hope in the train station. But how could he approach her without startling or scaring her? He had to be careful. This was a child, after all, and her world was nothing like his. Emily, unaware that her actions had captured the attention of a millionaire, went about her daily chores, helping her mother, running errands, and making sure her younger brother didn't get into trouble. Her small world was simple, full of struggle, but it was also filled with love and resilience. She didn't know that the man she had helped was quietly planning a way to support her family, to make sure her acts of kindness were rewarded in ways she couldn't even imagine. That evening, as Emily returned home from the market, she found a neatly wrapped package on their doorstep. Her mother looked at it, confused. "Didn't order anything," Maria said, cautiously opening it. Inside was a note, in elegant handwriting. "To Emily, thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists. R.W." Alongside the note were 2 envelopes, one with enough money to cover their rent and groceries for the next several months, and another with a voucher for school supplies and warm clothing. Emily's eyes widened in shock, but before she could react, her mother held her close. I don't know what to say," Maria whispered, tears forming. "Who would do this?" Emily, clutching the note, felt a mix of awe and confusion. She didn't understand wealth, didn't understand how someone could give so much without expecting anything in return. But she understood one thing: her small act of kindness had been noticed, and it had made a difference beyond her wildest dreams. For Robert, this was only the beginning. He had seen her heart, her courage, and her spirit. And now, he was determined to ensure that this little girl and her family never had to struggle in silence again. The encounter had changed something in him too, reminding him that life's true wealth isn't counted in dollars, but in moments of compassion that ripple outward, far beyond the actions themselves. The days that followed the mysterious package were a blur of disbelief and quiet joy for Emily and her mother. The small apartment, once dim and cold, now seemed brighter, almost as if the walls themselves were whispering relief. Emily clutched the voucher for new school supplies tightly, imagining a backpack that didn't have holes, notebooks that wouldn't tear, and pencils that actually worked. She could hardly believe that someone would care enough to provide such a gift without even asking for her name, though, of course, the elegant note had made it clear. Someone had noticed her kindness. Maria, still trying to process the sudden windfall, hesitated before using the money. Part of her wanted to save it, terrified of what might come next month when bills piled up again. Yet, seeing the excitement in Emily's eyes, she made a choice. They would allow themselves this rare moment of relief. That evening, they shared a proper meal, something beyond their usual bread and soup. The aroma of roasted chicken filled the tiny kitchen, and for the first time in months, Maria allowed herself a genuine smile. Emily laughed as she poured milk into their glasses, the sound light and unburdened. Meanwhile, Robert watched from afar. He had not wanted to overwhelm them, preferring to observe quietly at first. But seeing Emily's response to the gifts confirmed what he already suspected. A child with a heart so full of selflessness deserved more than just temporary aid. He wanted to give her family stability, opportunity, and the security he had long taken for granted. Slowly, he began planning how to reach out without frightening them, without making them feel like charity recipients. Emily returned to school the next day, her mind buzzing with excitement. She clutched her new backpack tightly, imagining the envy of her classmates. But what mattered more than the material gifts was the newfound sense of hope that seemed to trail her wherever she went. She realized that small gestures, no matter how humble, could spark change, sometimes in ways you could never imagine. At school, Emily's friends noticed something different about her. Her confidence seemed to have grown overnight, subtle but undeniable. She answered questions in class, helped classmates with homework, and even volunteered to clean the classroom board without being asked. The little girl who had once been quiet and reserved was slowly shining, her kindness reflected in every interaction. Back in the city, Robert decided it was time to take the next step. He wanted to meet the mother, to understand their life in a way that would allow him to provide more meaningful help. But he knew he had to do it carefully. No sudden appearances or grand gestures, just small, deliberate acts of generosity that could gradually build trust. He hired a trusted assistant to learn more about Maria's work schedule, the school Emily attended, and the family's routines. Everything had to be done with respect and discretion. That weekend, Robert made his first direct approach. He arranged for a delivery of groceries to arrive at their apartment, a week's worth of fresh food, carefully chosen to cover every meal, with a note attached, "A little help for a family who deserves it." RW. Maria's eyes filled with tears when the delivery arrived. She could hardly believe her luck. She looked at Emily, who stood quietly, clutching the note with trembling hands. Someone really cares," Maria whispered, the weight of stress lifting from her shoulders for the first time in months. Emily, curious and excited, couldn't contain her questions. "Mom, who is he? Why is he helping us?" Maria shook her head gently. "I don't know, sweetheart. But maybe he just wants to see kindness rewarded." Emily's mind raced with possibilities, but one thing was clear. She wanted to meet him, to thank him properly. The memory of his smile at the train station burned in her mind, a spark of connection that she couldn't ignore. Robert watched from a distance as Emily and her mother unpacked the groceries. He noticed the small ways they organized their tiny apartment, the care they took with every meal, every chore, every simple moment. Their resilience impressed him. Their dignity despite hardship touched him deeply. It reinforced his decision. Helping them wasn't about money or charity. It was about recognizing the humanity that often went unseen, the courage of those who lived with hardship every day, yet never lost their compassion. Over the next few weeks, Robert's presence became more consistent, though still subtle. Occasional deliveries, notes of encouragement, and small gifts for Emily's school, each act measured, thoughtful, and unobtrusive. Emily began to suspect a pattern. The same handwriting, the same careful thoughtfulness, the way every gift seemed perfectly suited to their needs. It wasn't just luck. She started writing her own little notes of thanks in secret, tucking them into the packages when they arrived, hoping that whoever was helping them would understand how grateful they were. Through it all, the bond between Emily and Robert remained unseen, unspoken, but profoundly present. Each act of kindness strengthened a bridge built on trust, empathy, and mutual respect. Robert admired Emily's courage, her selflessness, her ability to see the world not as it was, but as it could be. And Emily, though unaware of the man's true identity, felt a quiet reassurance, a sense that the world could still hold magic, even in the smallest gestures. In that delicate dance of generosity and gratitude, a story was unfolding, a story that would change both their lives forever. Emily had given her last $5 without hesitation, and Robert had quietly begun a journey to ensure that the kindness of a little girl could ripple outward, shaping a future she had never dared to imagine. The first time Emily saw Robert in person, she nearly dropped the stack of books she was carrying. It was a crisp Saturday morning, and she had gone with her mother to the park to pick up a small picnic, hoping to make the day feel like an adventure despite their modest circumstances. Emily had grown curious about the mysterious benefactor who had been quietly helping them, leaving notes, groceries, and school supplies. She had begun to imagine who he might be, a kind stranger, perhaps a man who had once known hardship himself. Robert, standing across the sunlit park, felt a nervous excitement he hadn't experienced in years. He wasn't used to approaching a child and her mother directly, not like this. Yet, the impulse to meet Emily and Maria face-to-face had grown irresistible. He watched Emily laugh as she chased after a butterfly, her tiny feet barely keeping up with her own boundless energy. This was the girl whose small act of kindness had struck a chord deep within him. It was time to meet the person behind the innocence and courage. As Emily approached the park bench to rest, Robert finally stepped forward. "Emily," he asked gently, unsure how to announce himself. Emily froze, then nodded slowly. "Yes." Her voice was cautious, curious, a little wary. "My name is Robert," he said, holding out a hand in greeting. I think you know me a little already." He gestured vaguely, indicating the small stack of groceries and supplies she had recently received. Emily's eyes widened. She hadn't expected to meet him. She had imagined him as someone kind and thoughtful, but standing before her was a man who seemed calm, confident, and genuine. A stranger who didn't feel scary at all. Maria, noticing the exchange, walked closer, her protective instincts kicking in. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice polite but firm. Robert smiled softly. I'm someone who is touched by Emily's kindness. I wanted to meet the girl who reminded me that there is still good in the world. He kept his tone careful, respectful. He didn't want to overwhelm them with his wealth or status, yet the truth would soon come out in ways that could change everything. Emily's curiosity overcame her shyness. You mean you're the one leaving the groceries and the school supplies? She asked, her voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. Robert nodded, smiling warmly. That's right. And I wanted to make sure that everything I've done actually helps in the way it's meant to. He paused, studying her small, eager face. Emily, your small act of kindness at the train station, it changed something in me. And I wanted to give something back. Maria blinked, trying to hide tears. She felt overwhelmed, but also deeply grateful. You didn't have to do this, she said softly. We didn't even ask for it. Sometimes, Robert replied, the world gives us moments that remind us what truly matters. Your daughter gave me one of those moments. I just want to make sure her family has a little more security, a little more hope. For a moment, Emily just stared, trying to absorb the gravity of the moment. She had given her last $5 without expecting anything in return, yet here was a man offering her family far more than she could have dreamed. Her heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude, awe, and an unfamiliar sense of responsibility. She realized that kindness could create a chain of effects far bigger than she had ever imagined. Robert suggested they take a walk through the park together. At first, Maria hesitated, but Emily tugged at her hand, eager to learn more about the mysterious man who had impacted their lives. As they walked, Robert asked gentle questions about their daily routines, Emily's school, and her dreams. Emily talked about her love of reading, her fascination with animals, and her wish to help her mother more than she already did. Robert listened intently, offering encouragement without judgment. Emily noticed small differences in him. The way he noticed little details, how he seemed genuinely interested in what she said, and the calm reassurance in his voice. It was unlike anyone she had ever met. He wasn't like the adults she encountered at school or in her neighborhood. He didn't talk down to her or treat her as less than capable. Instead, he made her feel seen. By the end of their walk, Emily's mind was spinning with possibilities. Could this man really help them? Could someone who didn't even know them want to improve their lives so genuinely? Robert's presence was overwhelming, yet comforting, like a safe harbor she hadn't known she needed. Robert knew the next step had to be handled with care. He wanted to offer more than temporary assistance. He wanted to provide long-term opportunities. But he also knew he had to respect their pride. This wasn't about charity. It was about giving Emily and Maria the tools to shape their own future. He began planning ways to support them without imposing, ways to empower them rather than simply handing them solutions. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily walked home with her mother, holding her hand tightly. For the first time in a long while, she felt hope like a tangible thing, something she could carry with her. Robert watched from a distance, quietly satisfied. He had taken the first real step in turning a fleeting act of kindness into a life-changing connection. And deep down, both of them knew that their lives were about to shift in ways that neither could fully predict. The morning sunlight streamed through the small apartment window, painting the room in soft gold. Emily bounced out of bed, excitement radiating from her like a spark. Today was different. Today, she wasn't just going to school with new supplies or eating a proper breakfast. Today, something bigger was about to happen. The mysterious stranger who had changed her family's life was coming to see them again, and she couldn't contain the mix of anticipation and nerves swirling in her chest. Robert arrived quietly, dressed simply, but there was a calm authority in his presence that filled the room. Emily clutched her mother's hand as they welcomed him inside. For Maria, there was still a sense of disbelief, a cautious hope that such kindness could exist without strings attached. She had been through struggles that had hardened her heart, yet here stood a man who embodied generosity without expectation.
Good morning, Maria.
Emily, Robert said gently, smiling warmly. I hope I'm not intruding. Maria shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. No, you've already done more than we could have ever imagined. Please come in. Robert had come prepared, not with charity, but with opportunity. He placed a small stack of papers on the kitchen table, careful to explain each one. Scholarships for Emily's schooling, a savings plan for the family, and even an offer for Maria to access support for training that could help her find a better job, all designed to give them independence, not dependence. Emily's eyes grew wide as she took in the papers. "All for us?" she whispered, barely able to comprehend the reality. Robert nodded.
Yes.
"Because of you, Emily. Your kindness reminded me that the world isn't as lost as it sometimes feels. And it inspired me to help you in a way that truly matters, long-term, meaningful help that gives you choices and opportunities." Maria reached out, taking Robert's hands in hers. "I don't even know what to say. We can't thank you enough." She paused, trying to steady her voice. "You've changed our lives." Robert shook his head gently. "No, Emily did that. She reminded me and everyone around her that a single act of kindness, even something small, can ripple outward in ways we can't predict. I just helped amplify what she started." Emily felt a swell of pride and warmth. She had given her last $5 to a stranger at a train station, not knowing he was a millionaire. She had given from her heart, not expecting anything in return, and now, her life and her family's life were transformed. It felt surreal, almost like a dream she didn't want to wake from. Over the next few months, Robert's involvement became a quiet, steady presence in their lives. He helped Emily enroll in a better school where she could explore her love of reading and learning. He supported Maria in taking a professional course that eventually led to a stable job. But he never overstepped. His guidance was subtle, always respectful of their dignity. Every time Emily saw him, she remembered the train station, the way she had acted without hesitation, and how that single moment had sparked a journey that changed everything. One afternoon, Emily stood on the balcony of their now bright apartment, watching the city below. Robert had taught her the importance of giving back, of noticing when others needed help. She clenched a small envelope in her hand, a $5 bill she had saved from her allowance. It wasn't much, but it was her turn to help. She looked for someone in need and quietly handed the money to a homeless man sitting nearby. The cycle of kindness continued, and she felt a sense of fulfillment she couldn't put into words. Robert observed this from a distance, smiling to himself. He had not only helped this family survive, they were thriving. Emily had become a beacon of hope, and Maria had reclaimed her confidence and independence. But the true magic, he realized, was that Emily's single act of selflessness had created something far more enduring than any money or gift. It had sparked a culture of compassion that would ripple far beyond their little apartment. The final chapter of that story unfolded on a quiet evening when Emily, Maria, and Robert sat together in their living room, sharing laughter and dreams. Emily spoke about her aspirations to become a teacher, to help other children just like herself. Maria talked about plans to expand her work, to create stability for herself and her daughter. And Robert, watching them, felt a profound sense of fulfillment he hadn't known in years. He realized that true wealth wasn't measured in millions or possessions. It was measured in the impact one life could have on another, in the kindness that inspired hope where there had been none. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily looked up at Robert and smiled. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. "You didn't just help us. You believed in us." Robert nodded, feeling the weight of those words. "No, Emily. You believed first. I just helped make sure the world noticed." And in that moment, the small girl who had given her last $5 at a train station realized that even the simplest acts of kindness could transform lives, sometimes in ways far beyond imagination. The stranger she had helped was no longer just a stranger. He had become a part of their story, a reminder that goodness and generosity could change everything, and that one small heart could spark miracles in the world.